Hello, it's Aimee, and I will be creating my March Bujo in this video. I sketched out my cover page already and lightly erased it because I plan on using watercolors for this page. Before I painted, I used a color pencil to line my sketches. I'm not really confident with using watercolors, so I needed to be able to see my sketch when I start to paint. I learned my lesson from the last time I didn't line my sketches in my cookie recipe video and had to wing it when I started to color it in. It will also give a nice, softer look compared to my usual lining technique. On top of that, I will be painting hands, and that is already a challenge on its own. Don't ask me how many times I had to erase this sketch and redraw because I couldn't tell you. Enough for me to almost scrap this theme idea completely. I was really happy with how the line work turned out, so I began to fill in the drawing with watercolors. Now, when I say I'm not confident with watercolors, I mean I am a complete newbie. The only time I really tried to use watercolor paints were for a project my mom asked me to do about 2 years ago. I had to watch tutorials on the best way to paint skin tones and shadows, and it was not easy. Even looking back at it, I could tell I was too nervous to go darker in some areas that needed more shading. I did paint hands another time, but it was a completely different process since it was fabric paint and not watercolors. I feel like this cover page will be the knowledge I gained from those two projects, but I had a little confidence going into it, especially since the paper in this bujo is not really for watercolors. You can use watercolors, but it will have different results compared to using watercolor paper. I know the hands will have a lot more added layers to them, so I worked on the March lettering to give them more drying time. I went back and forth on adding more red in the paint and blending the colors to make an ombre effect. To ease myself into adding more colors to the hands, I started off with adding a light red tint to the fingertips, creases, and knuckles on the hands. I just blocked out the areas that I felt needed more red for the skin tone, and then went back in with a clean wet brush to blend out the harsh lines. I alternated between the top and bottom hands to allow them to dry before adding more color. With these pages not being watercolor paper, it's very easy for the paper to start getting torn up from the moisture and sometimes can bleed through. You can also use a hairdryer or fan to speed up the drying process if you are in a time crunch or if you get impatient like me. Something I learned from my previous watercolor painting was the lack of depth from not adding more color. Even if it seemed a bit scary, I went on to add more red to the areas that I felt needed more shading and slowly blended it out throughout the painting. This is where I could have either gone to the other hand to let this painting dry a bit more, but as I've said before, I was very impatient and decided to add some dark blue shading where the fingers curled. You can kind of see how the color started to look a bit grainy, and that's from the paper being too wet and causing some flaking. I think that is a user error, me, and not necessarily the paper's fault, but it's something to consider if you decide to paint directly in the bujos. I continued to do the same steps for the other hand. After the hands were completed, I moved on to coloring in the fingernails and added some final touches to the piece. With the painting portion done, I wanted to decorate the page a bit more. If you've seen my previous March themes, there is always the same added element to them, which are cherry blossoms. I have different size cherry blossom hole punches and different shades of pink paper I used for them. I collected them all in a container that used to have chocolates in them to keep them all together. I sorted through them and tried to lay out where I'd like to place them before gluing them down. With the pieces being a bit too small to handle, I used tweezers to make it easier for picking them out. The corners of the pages were also too empty for my liking, so I went with using some scrap paper from Notebook Therapy to fill them in. It's been a while since I did some scrapbooking in my journals, and for good reason. It takes me forever to figure out the placement and paper combinations to make it look good. I really admire people who can create pieces so beautifully with stickers and scrap paper because my brain just doesn't compute it very well. I recorded this portion of the page to show you my struggles, which I hope it shows. After laying down where I wanted the pieces to go, I pasted them down using my Tombow glue tape, at least for the larger sections. I used a glue stick for smaller areas or any areas that lift. I added some pink and cherry blossom themed washi tape to decorate the page a bit more and use these cute cherry blossom stickers that I bought from Daiso. To match the stickers, I used my white gel pen to draw in some lines on the paper cutouts and added some extra highlights to the March lettering. The cover page took way too much time than I expected, so I kept it somewhat simple for the content calendar. I lined the calendar itself using my Tombow dual tip brush pen using the finer side, and also added a grid pattern with a lighter pink color. I hole punched some craft paper circles for the days of the week and sprinkled in some cherry blossoms to fit the theme. Once I pasted all of the pieces down, I wrote in the days of the week with a white gel pen and added some white lines in the larger cherry blossoms to complete this spread. It's been a while since I put in that much effort into my theme and wanted to admire it for a little longer. The next page in this theme will be my habit tracker and menus. To spare you the time and pain of watching me struggle with scrap paper again, I already have the scrap paper I prepared off camera ready to use to set up this page. The Tombow glue tape that I have has a slight tint of blue, so I went with pasting the white scrap paper down with my glue stick and using the glue tape for the craft paper. To fill in some of the empty areas, I used the same washi tapes to decorate the page even further. This month, I decided I wanted more habits to track, but also wanted to save some time while making the tracker. The easiest tracker layout for that is the one I outlined on top, a horizontal style tracker. I outlined my menus for each week, splitting the boxes in half for lunch and dinner. I filled in the headers with a darker pink and then went in with a lighter pink to make a grid pattern for the habit trackers and filled in every other line for the menu. Here are some of the things I like to track for myself, if you'd like some inspiration for that. There was a huge lack of cherry blossoms on this spread, so I sprinkled in some more cherry blossoms to decorate the page even further. When I added in the cherry blossoms, I completely forgot about adding in the headers for the trackers. With the spaces available to me, I wrote in habit and menu titles with a brush pen. I added some more colors to the lettering, which I forgot to record. We finish up the rest of my spreads with my weekly setups. Dutch doors have been the only way I can keep up with my setup so far. This month will be a little bit different since I will include cute tabs for them. For the borders, I have this really cute and textured scrap paper from the Notebook Therapy bundle. They were a bit hard to glue down because they were very textured and thick. It made putting down the cute washi tape a bit harder as well because the washi tape would keep lifting, but it was worth it for the results. The sticker pack from Daiso had multiple designs in them, and this was one of them. I placed the first tab design down and then cut off the excess paper. I used an X-Acto knife for the areas that were more difficult to cut with the scissors. Once the tab was rounded off and completed, I went on the opposite side of the tab to place the same sticker, matching it as close as possible. I repeated the same steps for the other two tabs. Once the tabs were completed, I placed down a sticker from the same pack for the mini calendars each week. I already planned out where I wanted the mini calendars and used the sketches as a guide. Using the same pink color marker from the other spreads, I outlined each weekly box, leaving an empty space for me to fill in the header. I planned the boxes around the tabs and calendars and did a bit of Tetris to have them all fit for each week. The part that took the longest for the weeklies was making a grid pattern for each and every box. I always love how they look in other people's spreads, and I realized why I don't really do them. It is so tedious and I have zero patience for it. They look amazing, but I don't know if I want to do it for every box again. I finished up the rest of the weeklies with writing in the days of each week and adding some more cherry blossoms to wrap it up. Side note, I'm sorry if this video didn't have as much commentary as usual, but my throat was really giving out. I can't tell if it's allergies or a cold, but either way, I didn't want to aggravate it more. Let me know if you prefer it this way or more commentary. Here is the final flip through and close-up of this month's theme. I really stepped out of my comfort zone with using watercolors and am very proud of myself. March is always my favorite month to create because I am obsessed with cherry blossoms. They always brighten my mood and are so beautiful. They tend to represent the beauty of life, but also how short their beauty lasts. I sometimes do not stay present and constantly worry about my future, but cherry blossoms are such a great reminder to me that we only have one life and we should cherish what we have and be grateful. I hope these spreads bring some light for you and brighten your day. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate all of the love and support from you. Please let me know what you think, and if you have any suggestions for themes that you'd like me to make in the comments. Take care of yourself, and bye for now.